So people simply, they need places to get out, find a change of scenery, breathe in fresh air, and heal. So it would be fair to say that during this past year, many people have gained and renewed appreciation for the county parks. So thank you for that. And I want to encourage the residents to check our webpage about all the facilities that are currently open. You know, we are every time that we have the opportunity to open a facility and in preparation for the summer, we are doing that. So if you, Atara can place the link to the COVID-19 webpage in our website. So then you can learn more about the facilities that were closed during the pandemic that we start opening. So with that, you know, in our department, how we implement projects, the money that is spent on building and renovating facilities, physical places, and also acquiring parkland is part of what we call the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. And then the funding dedicated to pay services such as the activation programming and operations comes from our operating budget. So those are the two sources. So the CIP plan requires project with a minimum of $30,000 in terms of cost. And these items, they have to sustain a 15-year cycle in terms of, you know, how long they're going to last in order to classify and qualify. So how is the CIP budget split? As for the one that we just finished, that was amended in September last year, 60% of our budget is dedicated to renovation and maintenance of our existing facilities, is the big bite of the pie. And while the remaining 40% is split between acquiring new parkland and developing new park amenities, and they're sort of equally distributed. So how do we produce a list of which parks will be implemented first? This slide shows the steps taken to make the selection. So pretty much we receive recommendations of projects from different sources. Then we apply a certain criteria to sort them out and reduce that list. After that, we build scenarios on which funding sources will be associated to each project. And then we prepare work sessions with the planning board and subsequent with the council. So here we say, you know, how the project's requests, how we receive these project requests as the first step for the CIP. So we have different sources, you know, a variety of plans and studies, such as the SPROS plan, the Parks and Recreation Open Space, that, by the way, we're going to be coming back to the community to ask for input this year. This year, we are preparing for the 2022 Parks and Recreation Open Space that would account for everything in our county. So watch out for that. It's coming, our outreach sessions. We have the EPS plan, that is the Energized Public Space plan that we are utilizing in this the Silver Spring plan as an analysis and tool. And then we have the sector plan. So by participating of these sessions with the Silver Spring team, you are collaborating and your requests will be taken into consideration. And also we have other sources like the facility plans. So for example, we heard a lot about the Jessup Blair local park. So if the Jessup Blair gets selected as potential renovation project, it will go through a facility plan to determine in detail what amenities we'll be looking at. Another source of the project request is sometimes citizens, they just request these projects on the public forum. So the CIP public forum is coming in June 10th. Atara can put in the chat the link to the CIP webpage. It's not there yet, the link to register for the CIP forum, but it will be coming soon. But at least you have the address of the website that you can learn a little bit more about the detail of the CIP process. And also, you know, we receive directives from the planning board and from the county council. We have also recommendations for park staff based on the projects that they just finished and their work with the community. And another very important one is through development review process. So the Silver Spring sector plan, when it gets approved, it will be a policy guidance to update it from the 2000 Silver Spring plan. So the development reviewers from the Silver Spring area, we'll be looking at the Silver Spring sector plan to see if we have overall recommendations of parks and public spaces and the location of those when do they do a development review. So your participation and input is really important because of that. And that just brings us how, can we participate by participating of sessions like this, and especially the listening, the visioning, and then the subsequent public hearings and planning board work sessions. Your input will be considered in this policy guidance documentation that is the sector plan, but you also have other opportunities to participate as a community. Like I mentioned, the CIP forum. You also can write letters to the planning board during the public hearing sessions of the master plan and of the CIP as well, and also the facility plannings and other studies or any studies that we are presenting to the planning board. So the plan look at the existing policy documents such as the PROS and the EPS plan, the also general plan, the Thrive 2050 campaign that generated a lot of community input for the general plan. So when this plan, the Silver Spring sector plan, gets approved, the recommendations of this plan will supersede the overall more generic recommendations of the sort of countywide plans, like the general plan, the PROS plan, and the EPS plans. That's why it's really important that you participate as a community in this plan. Then what happens is that the recommendations of the Silver Spring downtown and adjacent communities plan would be guiding other more detailed studies, such as the facility plans that I mentioned and other studies that parks will be doing. So we always refer back to this policy documents, such as the sector plan, especially when we have a specific area like Silver Spring. And also during development review, the planners will be looking into the sector plan to see recommendations. As a byproduct of the sector plan, we're going to have design guidelines. So during development review, we'll also consult for quality of design into the sector plan, because we dive in deep onto the districts and we see what each district is requesting in terms of policy and guidance and community input. So one good example of this process in practice is that Silver Spring was the pilot area for the Energized Public Space Functional Master Plan that was approved by the council in 2018. So it was a parks-led project to really focus in parks and public space within the urbanizing areas. This plan focused on establishing a framework to identify where the highest park needs are located within the urban areas. As the community already stated back then, we need more parks where we have more people. So in this slide, you can see in the orange colors, the filling, that you have the park deficit areas, and then you have in the red outline, the equity focus areas that were established in the general plan. So the idea here is that we merge the equity focus areas that was determined during the general plan with the energized public space deficit areas, and that layer becomes sort of a parks priority areas to be filtered with other analysis that we do, but at least we can start focusing on that. And Silver Spring, it just happens, is both, So the bad news is that Silver Spring has being a focus in terms of you have a lot of deficits in terms of parks, and you are also an equity focus areas. But the good news is that because you are in this situation, that we will be focusing and prioritizing Silver Spring for the park implementation efforts. Based on the recommendations that we had in 2009 from the Silver Spring Green Space Plan, and also from the 2018 EPS plan, the parks is actively pursuing land acquisition in Silver Spring. Of course, we don't have anything close, but once we finalize some acquisition, then we can release that information to the public. But I just want to know that we are actually active pursuing new parkland for Silver Spring. So with that, we're going to move to the second portion of the presentation that focus on the the Energized Public Space tool, and I'm going to be sharing, and Atara can share a link to the story map that you can, at your own time, check it out. It has a lot of these different instructions. I will go through a couple of the tools, but right now I just want to explain the context of the tool. So starting with how traditionally we look at our parks and public spaces, the gray layers that you are seeing here. We collect what we have, we look at opportunities with the community, and then together we make recommendations. So that's sort of the traditional park planning process. What the EPS plan is bringing that is new and can support with more data-driven information is we are bringing all these layers that are in orange. So in this way, we want to enhance our analysis of park planning and support our recommendation in a similar way that other land uses have been doing with their own metrics. We create a metric. So housing, you look at rent prices, property tax, and transportation, you look at the level of service in certain intersection, it's bad, it's good. So in this case, we start looking at park metrics. A couple of years ago, they came up with the 10-minute walk campaign led by the Urban Land Institute, the City Parks Alliance, and the National Recreation Park Association. And we were really excited. But then when we applied the 10-minute walk to the Silver Spring area, that was our pilot area, it just revealed Silver Spring is well served. And we know that's not true. So we said we cannot use this traditional metric. So we have to create a different metric. So as I mentioned before, with the advent of the pandemic, we are experiencing considerable rise in the use of parks and public space in our system. So people are appreciating more than ever the benefits of being active, enjoying nature, and spending time with family and friends outdoors. So what we decided to do, we decided to focus on the walking access, not only to a parkland, but we decided to focus walking access to something to do, and something to do in three major recreation experiences: active, contemplative, and social gathering. And now we really try to focus the park analysis from the user perspective. If all parks are not created equal, small park, different from a large park with a lot of things to do. It's not fair to say you are served while your neighbor that lives 10 minutes away might have like 10 things to do and you only have 2 things to do in your park. So our metric will be how much experience points per person we are providing this area compared to other urbanizing areas within the study area of the energized public space. And Silver Spring is one of them. So we really want to measure apples to apples, how you are doing, how many things you as a resident, as a worker, you have to do versus other urbanizing areas. So here are some results that highlight that this community, Silver Spring, with the planned boundary, is below the average. So everything that is in red is you are below average. Everything that is in green, you are above average. And the sort of yellow color is in between, is the at average. So you can see that the study area is pretty much mostly, if not 100% in some cases, below average. The message here is that we have a higher need for active recreation in this area, what is supported by the fact that a lot of our facilities, not just inside our parks, but also in our public spaces, our private-owned public spaces, are usually like a bench, a sculpture, a decorative landscape, and that does not necessarily provide the active recreation the community might be in need. Very quickly, this is just like what we present in the briefing, just to say that we look into our overall park system, the number of spaces, the acreage, the contribution to the pervious surface and 3 canopies, and we also apply the EPS. So what we're going to be focusing today in the presentation, but please feel free to ask other questions not related to that too in this session, is going to be how we are applying a new analysis to support the need for more parks and open spaces. I just want to remind that, beyond the quantitative analysis in terms of how many things we can access within 10-minute walking distance from whatever you are in the Silver Spring area, we do have the design guidelines that were created in conjunction with the functional master plan that we're going to be applying in this plan during the design guidelines process. So if you want to check it out, we have three major design principles. Today, we're going to be focusing on the access and connectivity, but we also create the sense of community and urban ecology. And I just want to highlight that our next chat with the planner next week will be focused on the urban ecology and how to do sustainable design. But today, I just want to focus on the access and connectivity that is sort of the new layer that we are adding to park planning that we didn't have before. So with that, I would be sharing a little bit of, this is the story map, and Atara can put the link on the chat, but this is accessible. You can go here and you can play around with anything you want. So this is just to show that when we decided to show everything you have access to, for instance, this is like Fairview Urban Park. So we went ahead and we identified every single facility you have. In the case of the Fairview, you have a meeting lot, a picnic area, a playground, a decorative small garden area here. And then you have Woodside Urban Park. And then we identify all the amenities that you have. And one thing we also consider, we identify the urban tree canopy because we think that having shade trees in the parks is really important. So we gave points to that as well. So I'm going to start by saying that these two, you have like these little icons here. So if you click in this one that has a little box, is what they call the walk shed tool. And if you just place this little indicator here, let's say we are in the old Georgian Tower across the street from the old MRO building, across from Woodside Urban Park. And then if you just click run, because it's already pre-established, you have a half a mile distance that corresponds to walking 10 minutes from where you are. It was going to generate an area representing everywhere you can walk and we can reach within 10 minutes time. So here we go. So everything that is showing in blue is where you can walk from the Georgian Tower to that now I think is called Arriving Silver Spring. They changed the name recently. And so you can see that this is, if you walk based on the pedestrian network, you can reach out to all the Silver Spring area, So here is something else that you can do. So you can query, let's say, I want to know if within 10 minutes I can reach out a dog park or a playground. So you can go to this tool here that have like a searching, and you can select your facility. So let's say I want to know where I have a dog park, a dog run, and I also want to know where I have playground. And they can do, together, or you can do separate. In this case, I just hit apply, and they highlighted the areas. So you can see that. And I know you can do separate. I'm doing together just because of time. But if you are living in the Georgian Tower here, you can see that I have a couple of playgrounds right across the street. So it's within my 10-minute walk area. And then you also have another playground here in Fairview. But then you see, if I have to reach out to the dog park and the playground in Ellsworth, I might need to budget a little bit of more time. It might take me like 12 minutes to get here, and then you can do that for the entire county. Like you have this option to say, I want to see the full extent of the map, meaning the whole county, So what that tool does, it allows you to see all these little, and I'm going to change the base map so you can see better, all these little red dots that you see here. It identifies all the playgrounds, or dog parks or dog runs, but the majority will be playgrounds, And then you can go back to the tool, and you can go to the result and say, I just want to know where I have dog parks. I don't want to know anymore where I have the playgrounds. So you can click here and you say remove these results, and it will delete. And then here you click in the facility, you trash in this little trash box your previous selection, and then you just go in and say, okay, I want to start fresh. So I want to start from selecting my facility, a dog park. And then I go here and I say, I just want to know where I have a dog park. And I want to know in the entire county. See, they will highlight it here. Now, if I only want to know, and I'm going to zoom in Silver Spring back, I only want to know within my current extent and I apply, then it will select the dog parks that are in the Silver Spring area or in the area that you have the zoom. The other thing that I want to jump in, that is the last thing in the presentation, is the scenario builder. This is very exciting because, all the time, we never had the opportunity to test, like a lot of the other land uses, they have the possibility to test. If you put that many people and if you bring that many development, how much the traffic's going to get worse or better, how can we mitigate it? So we decided to do something similar with the parks and open space. So here you have the ability to see, by default you have, where you have the shortages. So of course you can zoom in Silver Spring, and then you can ask yourself, I want to know, going back to the Georgian Towers, I want to know in the Georgian Towers, if I was going to understand how many points I have in this specific area, I can just hit the button. And what it does, it creates again the area that you were walking within 10 minutes, but it's going to evaluate that area in terms of people who live inside this 10-minute walking, how many active, contemplative, and social experience points they have. And you can see here they automatically generated. So all this area here, and you can see based on the color, is below the average. And here they say how many points you need. So what does it mean, how many points is need? So for each amenity, we gave a point for each experience type. So a playground has points for active, contemplative, and social. A dog park has points as well. So you have the ability with this tool, and we're going to go to the next tab. How do I disappear with this tab? Here we go. We have the ability to generate it with these two. What are many points? But then let's say that I know there is a new building coming here in this area. I know I'm already below average. And then let's say that a population of 2,000 people come. You can just hit the button again. You populate how many people are coming. And let's say the developer is not giving anything new for the parks or any public space. And then what happened is that before you needed these points, and then when you put more people, you need more points. And then you ask, how many points might take it so we get out of this below average? So it would take approximately, and we know we calculate how many points the Woodside Urban Park has. It might take you close to a little bit more than 2 Woodside Urban Parks in order for this area that you are seeing here in Silver Spring to get to an average situation that you are no longer below average. So I think with that, and I'm just going to end here because I want to be able to show people, that now, similar to other land uses, we can start calculating the impact of bringing more people and looking at how many things to do based on the population we can have in this area. And this is just like to finalize. We did that with a lot of different areas. And, the overall points in the study area, that is the urbanizing area, is around 4 points, experience points per person. But when you see in the downtown areas, because we have so many people in the downtown areas, the points are really small. But then if you go to an area like Garrett Park, the density is really low. So you have much more experience points per person because you are in an area that have very low density. So that's why we really want to focus in areas such as Silver Spring, the ability to provide more parks and public spaces. And now we have a tool that is data driven that can bring that to the community. With that, I'm gonna ask Tara to see if people want to have an opportunity to ask questions, or if they want to see something different on the screen or to play more with the tool.
Yes, so Christina, there was one question a little bit earlier on, back during the part of the presentation where you were discussing the CIP. There was a question about whether or not everything that you are presenting, does the CIP come solely from taxes?
No, they are like the funding for the CIP has different sources. We receive money from the state, from the program Open Space. So this year we are developing the 2022 Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. So once we finalize this plan, because we do a needs assessment and we're going to be doing a community survey as well, we identify the needs of Montgomery County. And therefore, we get portion of the money from that program to finance some of our park facilities. Another part comes from, we have the Montgomery Parks Foundation. So sometimes we get money from the foundation, especially when it's activation or sometimes it's a donation of a sculpture or some benches. So some money comes from there as well. And then we have government bonds as well, MNCPPC commission bonds, in addition to others. So the funding source is diverse, and I can actually, if the person wants to follow up with that, I can put the person in contact with the CIP manager where they can go in more detail about our funding sources.
Thanks. So anybody else has questions, or you want to ask Christina anything else about sort of this? I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted to share this today is because this tool is new, and this is the first, as Christina said, the tool was developed sort of as a result or in along with the Energized Public Spaces Functional Master Plan, which was just approved in 2018. So this is the Silver Spring Sector Plan, sort of the first plan where we're getting to use it. And lucky for us, they used Silver Spring as the test area. So there was a lot of data already about Silver Spring, and now we're getting to use this tool to help us understand what sort of what we have and what we're missing, and sort of combine the data that we get out of this sort of metrics-based system with everything we've learned in public engagement and put it all together to come up with our recommendations.
Yeah, and I saw a comment on the chat about the proprietary to Montgomery County. So that's a funny question because we present this project in different conferences related to parks. The Greater Greener, we present to the NRPA, the 10-minute series with City Parks Alliance and ULI. We presented to the American Planning Association. We actually got an award for the tool. So a lot of the questions like trust for public land, the reason why people don't want to do the type of analysis that we are doing with this project is because it's a lot of work to identify every single facility and then score them. So a lot of jurisdiction like small parks departments, they do not have the technology and the labor to be able to collect that type of information. That's why when you apply a tool in a national sort of campaign, you have to rely on fewer resources. But since Montgomery County has these resources, and we saw it was unfair to say that Silver Spring is well served because we know the problem is not access to parkland. You can walk to a piece of green. The problem is that what is the quality and what are the things I have to do? And is that type of experience serving everybody? So we put the design guidelines to say you have to serve all ages, because sometimes having a playground and having some sport courts will not necessarily serve everybody, so we need to look at the diversity of uses that we can have in our parks and public spaces as well. Let me see.
Christina, there are a few questions now in the chat to explain about the point system.
Yeah, so I can actually share the screen because it's easy to show with graphics. Let me open the website again. I'm glad that you asked that. So what we've done, you can go, if you go to like this, what we call the EPS Experience Index, that I didn't show because I didn't know if we had time. So here is like the consolidation of the points per person together. These are only active, only contemplative, and only social. The way we calculate it, we create a table where you have 90 plus types of amenities. It's easy if you just look at the table called amenity, and we look throughout the county, what are the things we had in our system. So,
Christina, I don't think
Can you
you're
share
sharing
your
the
screen?
screen yet.
oh,
Can you share your
Sure.
screen, please?
sure.
Thanks.
So I thought I had. So the way it works is we put together a list of like 90 plus amenities, and they are ranked based on how much they respond to active recreation, how much they respond to contemplative and social. And the way they respond, what I mean by responding is, can more people use this facility, or this facility is just for a specific, so like let's say tennis courts. Let's compare tennis courts with a trail system. So a trail is much more democratic because it doesn't matter your age or your skill set. You can walk and use a trail. But a tennis court is specific to tennis players with, and then requires certain equipment and requires certain physical conditions to play. So we look at these sort of factors, and then we look at each of these facilities, and then we score 0, 1, 2, 3, 0 being nothing and 3 being a lot. And then we would give points for every single facility based on these experiences. Of course, facilities like trails and natural wooded areas, we had to use a different math based on length of the trail and based on square footage of wooded area. But we gave more contemplative points for wooded area, of course, because of the sort of ambience and access to nature that it gives us. So I can follow up with like more detail. I have different presentations focused on how we scored those, but like short, based on the tools that we have, that's how we score. And in the story map, we have a definition of what we consider active, what we consider contemplative, and what we consider social gathering experiences. But it's pretty much, that's where sort of the relative comes. The quantitative is really measured. Can I walk here? And can it be in 10 minutes? And the beauty of that is I can go anywhere in the urbanizing areas, the EPS study area, click on the grid and generate an analysis. So there are more than, I think, Rachel, you are in the call. How many thousand grids you have in the system? I would guess is like hundreds of thousands of grids, and we generate a watershed for each one of them. And we did that because we really want to give the opportunity to the community to come to this tool in the future and see, how am I doing? Or I want to live in this area. So I think real estate people might use that area, saying everything that is green, it means you are well served in terms of parks and public spaces. But it also has to do with density. In these areas, you might have like a lot of forests and parks, and you have also sort of suburban development that has very low density. So don't get fooled by it. Just means that proportionally, based on walking access, you have proportionally more access than the people here. But if you live in Silver Spring and live near Woodside Urban Park, you have access to not just the Woodside Urban Park, but the Fairview. So it's relative. We did that too because we really want to focus on trying to be fair how we distribute our resources to the county residents and county workers. So I hope with that, is there any other question? I can see. Consideration of for coverage, variety. Yes, I think that's sort of the way we weighing. So, like tennis courts, we weighing less for social gathering than a trail. A trail has 3 points for social gathering because allows more people to use the trail versus tennis court will have just one because only the tennis players will use that. And the idea is that in the future, in the urbanizing areas, we want to do multi-age facilities to bring more flexibility. So everybody's invited to use those facilities. And it's like we were exploring, like even multi-use play areas, so in order to integrate the different generations as well. A lot of the parks that we are start building these days, I think one that we just finished, the East North back, we start putting trails around the playground. So if grandparents, parents bring the kids to the playground, they can watch the kids while they exercise around the playground by walking on the trails. So we want to think that parks are for everybody. So how can we integrate these different functions? And the more things you add to a park, the more inviting it can be to a different audience. And consider we have different ages, different cultures, so we want to weigh in different. And if you want to write to me specific questions, I might be able to give follow up with more detailed description of the project. I just don't want to go into too much into the weeds in the session, but it's more open to the community. But if somebody's more interested in the technicality of that, I will be more than happy to go into the details and be a little bit of a nerdy geek on the information.
Christina, we have a question. Allison, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Hi, Christina. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. That was a really interesting presentation and really enjoyed learning about the tool. Can I ask you a question that's slightly different, though, about the privately owned public spaces,
Yeah.
POPs? Can you talk a little bit about how many of those you all anticipate will factor into the future of Silver Spring versus the more, traditionally what we know in the publicly just I don't know what you'd call them, conventional public park. Can you talk about what you all anticipate with the POPs in the coming years and say a little about that? Because I feel like there probably are going to be more in the future, but I don't know whether that's a correct assumption or not.
Yeah, well, this is something that we've been discussing internally, and Atara and Leslie can chime in, and Hujan as well. Silver Spring in specific has so many POPs. Like you see, I'm just sharing the screen. We have, 9 commission parks. We have 5 county parks and public spaces and 42 private-owned public space that we call POPs, like that we don't own, but they are supposed to be public accessible. And I think that one thing that we are thinking about those is during the Silver Spring sector plan is to make sure that we provide design guidelines specifically to these spaces that can guarantee that they will be open to the public, because I understand that a lot of the times and historically we saw in not just Silver Spring but in other areas, the guidelines were not specific enough to granted development reviewers to say, hey, this is the type and the quality of space that you need to deliver to the community. So we're going to be looking during the Silver Spring process to see how can we guide better the design quality of these private-owned public spaces. I believe we're going to have a balance of both. As I mentioned, Parks is actively looking for more parkland within Silver Spring, but we also know as development comes, as part of the development review, there is a requirement, of course, depending on the site, but I'm talking about bigger developments, to provide these private and public spaces. So I think it's going to be a balance. They're not going to stop coming. So that's why in this plan it's really important for us to provide a good design quality guidance. So in the implementation process, we can have a policy document supporting good design. And I don't know, Atara and Leslie and Hujong, if you want to chime in on that.
I think Hojung had her hand up. I'll ask that Hojung speak first, and then I can give an example of what we've done on other sector plans with POPs.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and thanks for the opportunity. For the record, I am Hojong Garland, and Allison, we see every night for all this public meeting. So thank you so much for asking such a great question. And I'm sure you already have a certain recommendation and thought from your end based on your experience. But while our Montgomery Parks is also discussing about, pros and cons about the POPs versus the publicly owned, the publicly owned is, first and most, we need to think about the operational and the maintenance aspect of burden, and also the speed of implementation itself. So those are challenge. Although the pro side it would be that I would call almost like the true public aspect that can be, warranted. In other words, public speech or even, any kind of protest and that kind of activity is possible because it's truly public space versus if it's a POP, it depends on the political, aspect. Certain activity might not be allowed. So, those kind of we're juggling those aspects. So, but in case if during the process of the sector plan, if there's a strong desire of certain place to be publicly owned, that it need to be spelled out during the sector plan and saying that, it requires dedication or conveyance and such. So that way, when it gets to the development proposal, that it's clear that what to be anticipated and such. So as much as possible. So that would be our side of my recommendation.
Thank you, Hojung. And I would just add, this is Leslie Howerton. I'm the supervisor for Down County Planning, Master Planning Team. As an example of what we've done on previously approved sector plans, because of the amount of privately owned public space and in the zoning ordinance requirements for each property owner space, one thing that we want to do to ensure the right amount and the quality of public open space is a lot of times we've recommended offsite improvements or contributions instead of POPs that are too small or that fail to enhance the public realm or that prevent a building from activating the street. So we want to have quality privately owned public spaces. And in cases where we couldn't get that, we've made recommendations in sector plans to provide offsite contributions to enhance public parks and other things within a plan area. Some of the other things we've done recently in plans with the zoning ordinance recommendations for open spaces, we made a recommendation where if there was less than a 10% requirement, that we asked for an improvement or a contribution to offsite public open space, because the idea is not to have postage stamp size spaces on every property throughout the downtown, but to have quality spaces that are public and it's evident to the public that they are public open spaces, that they activate streets and buildings and they contribute to placemaking. And so it really is about the right amount and the quality. And so I imagine we will look at those sector plans and the recommendations that were implemented recently to see how well they've worked. And as we go through our recommendations here, we'll consider alternatives like that if they're appropriate for Silver Spring. So just want to add that real quick.
Yeah, and I would, this is Atara again, I'll add one other thing that we are sort of studying in addition to, and just something that we're looking at to educate ourselves now as we think about POPs, in addition to looking at sort of what we've done in prior sector plans and see how it's worked. There are other jurisdictions and cities in the U.S. that actually have, and it varies by location, but actually have guidelines for POPs. And sometimes they're very minimal, but they may include a requirement for signage, say, that explicitly states that this is a publicly accessible area, or they may have sort of seating guidelines to ensure that seating that is sort of comfortable and the kind of place you'd like to sit down is available, which really point, those kinds of guidelines point towards, sort of requiring that the area really be something that feels welcoming and serves the public. And we've looked at a few different examples that have different ways of doing that, but I think we're all sort of thinking critically about what are the ways we can make sure in the future through the sector plan that the POPs actually serve the public realm. Because as everyone said, in a place like Silver Spring, we know, we will continue, that will continue to be a way that the open space network gets expanded. And so we're really looking at those places as part of the network and not, as sort of an off to the side thing that we can't do anything about.
Yeah, and I just want to share on the screen here, this is like just a snapshot of a checklist that is part of the design guidelines from the EPS. And here, like for each guideline, we have recommendations of, how you incorporate the site context, and that is applicable also to the POPs. So we wanted to create sort of this common language so the community developers and the planners will be able to apply all of that. So for each of these items, we have a paragraph, some examples of drawings that represent that, but we put it in a checklist format. So when we are doing the process of the sector plan, people can say, how is this space or this area? What is the quality of the design? How is accessing nature? How is accessing to everybody? So these are just, it's part of the design guidelines. You can go to the story map or to the link and study those. So the good news about the design guidelines is because it's not council approved, it's planning board approved as a complement to the functional master plan. It can be updated, anytime we have significant good information. So this is the one that was approved in 2019, but if we have new ideas and if we have examples, we can also add these examples. So we also have a little library online with a couple of examples of, parks that we think that are responsive to that, but we can always expand it. So if you have ideas, if you want to send us parks that you think that, I would love to have certain parks or certain public spaces, don't feel free, just send us, and then we can evaluate it and see in terms of maintenance cost, design, what can we start implementing in the potential new public parks, and then recommend during development reviews for the potential POPs that might come to the Silver Spring area.
Great, and I think Wendy had her hand up. So Wendy, go ahead. No, she put it down. If you have a question, feel free to share.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think the checklist may have addressed it in part. Thank you for sharing that. In terms of park design, I'm curious if noise is an element that's addressed. And in part, when we talk about contemplative spaces, noise is an element that could either contribute or detract from contemplation. So I'm curious if that's a design element. And I guess also how that might be addressed in a urban downtown place where there's lots of traffic and noise.
Yeah, I don't like we address in terms of, making sure we have enough distance. So we have like language in the design guidelines that you have to have a certain distance. And then, of course, depending on the facility, we have a different distance. So not just in the design guidelines, but when we design our own parks, there are a couple of, things that we start adapting. So one thing that we heard a lot of complaints is like sometimes is pickleball because it's noisier than a tennis court. So we start thinking about, like measuring the noise level. So we understand, what is the distance for that type of activity. So we start thinking about ways, because we understand that in the urban area, there are concerns about proximity to certain facilities. But at the same time, one message that we have to convey to everybody is that in the past, the Parks Department used to build parks as buffers from the downtown area to the residential areas. But now we have such limited amount of land and people are living inside the downtown areas. So we want to make the parks not as a buffer, but a park as sort of a transition area, an area that people come together, destination. So, you know, it's not going to be like it used to be before, that our parks were like really, really quiet. What we're going to try to do is to locate appropriate facilities that might be more active and noisy in certain locations. So, for instance, if it's by the side of a metro area, or by a backing a backyard of like a school site, or things like that. So that's why we are going over an exercise of park reclassification, exactly to understand regional parks. We might have more flexibility with these more noisy facilities, local parks as well. But when it comes down to neighborhood parks and like urban plazas and things like that, there are some issues and some things that we're going to have to observe. And that includes lighting. You know, lighting is something that we address in the design guidelines, because people want to use our parks after hours. You know, a lot of people want to be active after hours, but then it requires analysis of who is the neighbor. You know, if you are in a second floor of a residential building, you know, you have a bright light. So things like that we are analyzing. In the design guidelines, there are more generic recommendations, but it's something that when we go through facility planning of a specific park, we will look into the details of that. But thank you for bringing that up. I would put that as one thing that we should emphasize. I know we addressed that, but it might require a bigger element.
And then Christina, there's a question in the chat about bicycle lanes that I don't know if you've gotten to see. A question about how do we take, I think what Mel's asking is, do we take, does the point system sort of account for bicycle lanes? I think because that is sort of that's an active, that's like a space for being active, I guess. And so does EPS still take that into account at all?
No, the EPS taking account trails, you know, pedestrian trails, and, you know, some of the paved trails, but not bicycle lanes. You know, like the bicycle lanes, they will be accounted as a network, because you have a sidewalk, as a network where people can walk. But right now, in the future, is something that is sort of a wish list. We might want to do like bike sheds, so, and as a way to access parks, but we are not there yet. We are focusing on like walk sheds, that is like walking to the park. But we do not use bicycle lanes as part of a facility. You know, we just use the bike lanes as a way to access somewhere, but that's part of the pedestrian network. That in that case, we look at the sidewalks, because we are not analyzing the access through bikes yet.
Great, thank you. Wendy, do you have another question? Go ahead.
I do, and I just want to say that I really appreciate you guys doing this presentation. It's incredibly informative, and it's so exciting to think how advanced Silver Spring is in all of this planning. That's great. So I want to follow up on a question I put in the chat that you had addressed somewhat, but I really wanted to put a nuance to it. The point system for parks seems like, at least my understanding so far, is that if the park facility gets higher points in terms of certain aspects, it might be favored to be put in. And so I wonder if there's any, which is seems like a good approach, but then there's also this element of trying to have variety of parks to meet the variety of interests. And as an example, sand volleyball courts. That's something that when I lived in DC would use all the time. We'd go to not Silver Spring, but Crystal City and use their sand volleyball courts. I don't know if there's one here, but it's kind of a niche thing. I think there's actually quite a few sand volleyball players, but that's the type of thing that I wonder if it wouldn't get added to the list because it's so niche, and so wouldn't get points because it's not quite as quote unquote democratic. And so how do you account for those things that maybe not get as many points, but still, you know, could bring value to a certain crowd?
Yeah, I love that question, because we are actually going through our needs assessment beginning, like, because as part of the Parks and Recreation open space, we do a facility needs assessment. We actually hire a consultant to do that with us. So there is a sort of parallel process. The EPS would identify what you have, but the needs assessment, that is another separate process, looks at the county, separate the county in service delivered areas. And so look at facilities such as, the Sandy volleyball, and then they say, we do a community survey, and then we do a national trend survey. And then you see what are the trends, what is the community survey saying about, Sandy volleyball courts, what is the distribution of those in the county, and then we do online surveys as well to collect, like if the community is interested or not. So there is a series of sources that would determine where would be the best locations to put a Sandy volleyball court, and if there is a need in Montgomery County, and what is the highest need. So we these two that we create, the EPS, it analyzes the existing facilities we have, analyze how much of which one we have in proportion to these three experience types to, not have too much of one or the other. But what determines where we're going to have each facility actually is the PROS plan, is the Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. So it is a mix, like I said, community survey, national trends, because, national trends, they look at other jurisdictions and see what is the amount of people that each Sandy volleyball requires per area, per square footage. Like they have different metrics. And then we look at community survey because it can be that, in that demographic area of a certain service delivered area, even though they should have equal distribution of some resources, they might not be interested in that. They might be interested in something else. So it's a combination of things. It doesn't come from the EPS tool, it comes from the PROS plan. But I would definitely encourage you to participate of our community surveys that will be coming in June, July, August. That can be a way that you can learn more about how we calculate the location, the ideal location for the facilities and the distribution that we have in our system.
Great, thanks. If anybody else has any other questions really about anything related to parks planning and Silver Spring, does not need to be related just to the EPS tool or the implementation process, feel free to ask, or actually any other, many of us are here from the team. If you have questions about other aspects of the sector plan process, just let us know. We can send to everybody who was here, who registered for the session, sort of all the links of all the things that Christina mentioned, so that if people want to play around with the tool on their own time, there is a lot more to it on the web. There's different things to read. It's actually quite, it can be kind of fun to play around with. There's a lot sort of to learn, in that portal that they've created. So we'll send that out in sort of our post, in our post session email that you'll probably get tomorrow.
Yeah, and please send comments if you think something is not working that we can improve. I would love to hear from everybody.
So that's totally fine to ask an off-topic question. If we have, in the meantime, we'll answer it. And if we get another on-topic question, I would say it really varies. It varies based on the person, but we are a wide variety of people who have mostly planning backgrounds, urban planning, but sometimes specific types of planning, environmental planning, transportation planning. A lot of people have landscape architecture backgrounds. Several of us have urban design or architecture backgrounds, and that's in the people that you're seeing right here who are involved in the sector plan. We have a tremendous department that includes many other divisions, people who work in research, they work in data analysis, we have a GIS, section. And so it's really a wide variety of professional backgrounds, in truth. A lot of community planners and a lot of people with very sort of specialized backgrounds with sort of special skill sets, all that contribute towards the work that we do.
Yeah, and I want to add that the most exciting part of the developing these tools is that I'm not an expert in technology, but I had a supporting team from technology. Actually, Rachel Hastad is here with us in this call, and she was so instrumental in taking my crazy ideas and together with the director of ITI, Chris McGovern, to make things happen. So I had like this sort of wish list, like, and I would go knock on the door of the ITI department and say, okay, today's Christmas. This is what I want, like how long it takes, how much time that we're going to spend on that. And then they would deliver something. And I said, can it do also this? Can it also do that? And that, of course, increases the amount of dedication, data collection. But in the end of the day, I just encourage people that we have such huge resources in terms of the background of our staff in the planning and the parks department. If you have a good idea, don't be shy to share. We might not be able to deliver, but we might consider, if not to this plan, in future plans, because in the end of the day, you are our sort of end user, our main client that we have to serve. So we want to continue delivering the tools that could also allow you to better participate of this process of planning for better places.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody. Definitely, and as Christina said, I mean, feel free to make other specific requests. That's the only way we find out what amenities or what program elements, right, that the public feels are missing. I mean, Parks does a lot of engagement where they reach out and ask, but there's always people that we haven't reached, and we're always happy to basically hear any suggestions, whether about Silver Spring or about other parts of the county as well. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. I will say we have part of the goal behind these sort of chats with the planner was also to let people meet other members of the planning team. We have a very deep team of experts, but in these virtual meetings, it's usually just a few of us who are ever talking. So it's nice for me to not be the one presenting and let one of my teammates present their expertise instead. And so we have next week on Tuesday night is going to be a presentation by our environmental planner, Tina Schneider, about creating a sustainable downtown and some of the strategies that she's studying and looking into for the Silver Spring plan. The next one after that, then in the last week of May, we have two. We have one on affordable housing, which is really going to be about affordable housing in the downtown, looking at the policies that exist and talking about what we're studying and what we're considering in terms of those policies. And then also we're going to have a separate conversation on the last Thursday in May, right before Memorial Day weekend, about the sort of as what people call the heart of Silver Spring in one of our visioning sessions, the area that spans from Ellsworth Place on Veterans Plaza through to the Civic Building, and sort of talk just about that area and do a little visioning for that, looking forward the next 20 years. So just a few different topics and getting to meet some different people on the team and really go in depth about a specific topic. So thanks to everybody for joining us. And again, we'll sort of give you some of these resources in a follow-up email. Yeah, I think Hugh Jung is responding sort of to the, that the CIP forum is a great place to sort of chime in with specific facility needs. Okay. Anybody has any additional comments or questions before we sign off?
I just want to tell Melvin that he asked about the South County Regional Recreation Center. Yes, we actually, because it's under construction, we already account in the existing conditions.
Right. I guess that's true in general in the sector plan. Things that are sort of under construction, we count them as existing conditions because by the time we finish the plan, they'll be there or they'll be almost there. That's a general rule.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.